I know this is going to be a shock for you, but I have a question. How many of you have heard of General Ulysses S. Grant? How about General George Custer? Or General William Tecumseh Sherman? A few of you, okay. How about Major Jonathan Letterman? No? Okay. Now, I thought that might be the case. This is a name that is not nearly as familiar as Grant, Custer, or Sherman. And I would venture a guess to say, though, that the countless men who were treated by him on the battlefield might know him a little better. See, he is known as the father of battlefield medicine. And this is because of the system of organization that he developed that enabled thousands of wounded men during the Civil War to be recovered and treated. Major Letterman was charged with the task of organizing the medical care for Union soldiers during the Civil War. Now, imagine these wars. Some of us probably don't have that hard of a time imagining them if you've been to Gettysburg or any of the other major battlefields. Think in terms of the casualties that those lands saw, the number of men who were shot and killed, but also the ones and the significant injuries that they might have had from those musket balls that were being shot. Dr. Letterman developed a process for triaging those soldiers. Though it may sound obvious with so many injured soldiers on the battlefields, the first step that he taught in triage was to determine whether an injured soldier was dead or alive. Now, the obvious thing would be to do for us, right? Thinking about it, you feel for a pulse. But in that time, they needed to do something quickly. And the medics would often carry a piece of glass or a mirror to put underneath the men's nose to see if there was any condensation. They could have used smelling salts or checked for a pulse, but this was the easier way for them to do it. And moisture on the glass obviously meant life, right? No moisture meant, right. So just imagine the hope and the comfort that a medic might have felt when they saw that little bit of condensation forming on the glass or the mirror held under a soldier's nose. I have to wonder, though, what would Dr. Letterman have done if he encountered Lazarus, dead and buried in a tomb for 4 days? I'm guessing he probably wouldn't have needed to look for a pulse or to hold up a glass to his face. It was clear. Lazarus was dead. And the Gospel of John reports it this way. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now, Lazarus was not nearly dead, was not almost dead, was not gravely ill or soon to be dead. He was dead. And to throw in a little light humor, I cannot help but hear the words of the immortal mayor or coroner of Munchkinland. He's not only dead, he's most certainly dead. But I also could not help but reflect on what Dr. Letterman had to do. I mean, if you think about it, there he is on the battlefield facing men in terrible pain, having to triage and figure out who was going to survive and who was not. Now, the thing that we know about Lazarus is this. He had fallen ill and had died. Lazarus was not only dead 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, but 4 when Jesus arrived. And it's important to know that Lazarus had been dead for those 4 full days because in the ancient world, it was believed that the soul stayed with the body until the 4th day after death. Many people believed that it was possible for a person to come back to life during those first 3 days. If you think back to even the 1800s, does anybody know the tale of the bell above a burial? The bell was there in case somebody was buried alive, and they could ring the bell. And that, yes, it did happen. It did happen. So this is what people believed up until even the late 1800s. They believed it was possible for a person to come back to life within the first 3 days because they had seen it happen. There was a very real possibility that someone who was thought to be dead might be mistakenly buried. Now, without modern medicine to determine a pulse or breath or brain activity, somebody could actually be mistaken as dead and then revive after a couple of days. Now, we know that's not the case with Lazarus. He had not just fallen asleep or passed out. He had not swooned. He was gone. There was no question. And now imagine this from the perspective of Mary and Martha. They sent word to their friend Jesus, expecting him to come and do something. And now 4 days after their brother had died, he finally arrives in Bethany. And he clearly arrived too late. Lazarus is in the tomb. It is sealed. The friends and the family have already arrived. The potluck was underway, and the Jell-O casserole was already half eaten. Now place yourself in Mary and Martha's shoes, though. Imagine how they might have felt, knowing Jesus as they did. Would you be angry that Jesus had not come sooner? Would you be angry that Lazarus had died without hearing some final words from one of his closest friends? What kind of thoughts would be running through your mind? John tells us that as Jesus arrived, Martha came up to him and said, "Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died." Now, there are two ways we can hear this. We can hear them as a gentle and polite, or as that frustrated accusation that I imagine many of us might be feeling. Now, we don't know how Martha said these words. We just know this is what John reports her saying. It's very possible that she was angry and frustrated. She knew Jesus. She trusted him. She believed in him and believed that he could do anything. She was so certain that if Jesus had been there, that Lazarus would not have died. That he could have done something to save him. And what was Jesus' response? I like to hear it from the tone of comfort. Martha, your brother will rise again. And Martha says, I know that he will rise again. But let's pause there for a moment. There's also some confusion here, right? I'm hearing Martha say, okay, I know you, Jesus, and I know that you can do anything. But is she truly aware of what he's fully capable of doing? Martha had already in these words determined what was possible and impossible for Jesus to do. She had already determined that he would not be able to raise her brother from the dead after 4 days in the tomb. She had decided that his power began and ended before being able to raise Lazarus from the dead. Now, this is not the first time that Jesus spoke words like this either. And so Martha should have known Jesus could raise Lazarus. Earlier in John's gospel, he reports, Jesus saying, "For as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will." Yet Martha thought it was impossible, inconceivable, and unthinkable that this could be the time in which her brother would be alive once again and hear the comforting voice of Christ. Now, what strikes me about this passage is that Martha seems to have doubts. How many of us have ever doubted? I'm guessing based on those sounds that there's a lot of doubts in the room. I mean, we have questions, we have concerns, we have curiosity about what Jesus can do. And I think this is why she answered this question, or responded to his question. But wait, Jesus, I know you can do anything, but he's been dead for 4 days. He already stinks. And yes, that is truly what the words say. if you read the Greek. If you read the Greek, that is what it says. It certainly feels like she had given up the possibility that life could overpower death. She had already decided that Jesus was not capable of calling Lazarus out of the tomb here and now. What about us, though? I mean, here we sit 2,000 years later. Do we still doubt? Have we determined it's impossible for Christ to do this kind of thing? Better yet, let me ask it this way. Is there a sin or a guilt or a regret that you have decided is too big for Jesus to overcome? Is there some sort of brokenness in your life that you've decided is too profound, too big, too much for Jesus to bring comfort to? Is there a relationship that you think is too gone, too dead for Jesus to resurrect? Is there a pain or a burden or a fear that you can no longer bring to God in prayer because you think there is no possibility of comfort and consoling? Is there a loved one that's too far away from you, too wayward, that you have decided that he or she will never, ever experience the friendship and love of Christ? How often do we give up on things before holding that glass to see if there's even an ounce of moisture that develops? To look for signs of life. How often do we determine that things are already dead on arrival, beyond comfort, beyond hope? Here's the thing. In my experience, we all come to Christ with a preconceived notion of what is possible and impossible for him to do. We are like Martha in some way. If you'd only been here, Jesus, my brother could have lived. If you'd only done this, then things might be different. Maybe someday, but certainly not today. How many of us have ever felt like that in our lives? Friends, Jesus takes our shrunken, truncated, constricted views of him and blows them out of the water. Jesus takes what we think is impossible and shows us that it is entirely possible for him to overcome. Jesus takes what we think is inconceivable and turns it into reality. Jesus brought comfort to his friends that were with him that day with what he did next. And he says, roll that stone away. Yells out Lazarus' name and says, come out. And irony above all irony, to everyone's amazement, even to ours today, Lazarus walks out of the tomb. He was bound in linen strips, but he still comes out. And so Jesus says, unbind him, let him go. Jesus did the impossible. He did the unthinkable. He did the inconceivable. He called Lazarus out of the tomb and gave him life after being dead for 4 days. That in anything should give us comfort in knowing that nothing we carry is too big, too inconceivable, too far gone for Jesus to overcome. This is who Jesus is and what he's capable of doing. He makes the impossible possible. He makes the unthinkable thinkable. He brings comfort when it seems like there could possibly be none. And so I ask you again, what have you decided is impossible, unthinkable, beyond comfort, too far gone, too broken, or too hopeless for Jesus to overcome? Nothing is impossible for Christ. If this story teaches us nothing else, nothing is impossible. No sin is too great for his mercy. No relationship is too broken for him to recover. No burden is too great for him to carry. Death, whether it happened 4 days ago or 400 years ago or 2,000 years ago, is not insurmountable for Christ. And so nothing we could ever bring before him would be insurmountable. He can and will call his people out of the tomb by name. Now, that is some comfort. Yes? Yes. Okay. Whew. But I think it's comfort that we all need right now in today's world. In the coming days, I ask you to hold this hope, to hold this comfort, for it may all be all that you have in a moment. It may be greater than anything we can imagine or do ourselves, but Jesus is that powerful, is that big, and can overcome anything. Hold on to that. Amen.